Thanks for coming. I'll make it short. It's getting late. And my name's Ron Amburgey. A little bit about myself. I'm a lifelong resident of Costa Mesa, born and raised here. Graduated from Costa Mesa High School and Orange Coast College. Started my business here in 1975. I'm in the construction business, concrete construction. Worked around a lot of infrastructure. Done our own development projects where we did our own utilities. So I'm very familiar with how the construction of piping and so forth works. So that's a little bit about my background. I don't know how many people know that much about water. I've been starting my campaign. I just kicked it off last month. And it's amazing when I start talking to people how many people don't know what I'm talking about. So hopefully I can enlighten you a little bit. I'm going to start out with what I call the wall of shame here. And I'm fortunate tonight. My opponent is here in the room. Jim, raise your hand. There's my opponent. So he can help out. If I say something wrong, just correct the record. We're lucky we have the former director from our division. That's Hank Panion. So thanks for coming, Hank. Good guys. And I do know all the members of the board. I want to start out by saying that they're all good guys. They're all, as far as I know, they're Republicans. I don't know Jim as well as the others, but I think everybody's Republican. But just so you know from the get-go, I'm for term limits. And when you say stuff like that, it doesn't go over real good. These guys were my friends, and I started asking some questions. And the more questions I asked, the more I needed to know. And now I'm getting the cold shoulder from the guys that were friends that are on the board. So that's kind of where things are starting as I start my campaign. This is the wall of shame, I call it. 2 years ago, or actually it was last year, the Register did an article, I don't know if anybody remembers it here, on our water district. And it talks about some of the things. Jim, for example, was using a chauffeured limousine to go to the airport. And he did that many times. It cost $108 each trip. During this 2-year span of 11 and 12, he used it to the tune of $2,400. So the guy that did this, the journalist, spent several months and reviewed thousands of pages of documents to get this information. It's not readily available like you would think it would be. So it talks about the cost that the directors and some of the higher paid staff members turned in for reimbursement for basically for food and things in town and then out of town. So altogether they turned in expenses of $170,000 during that period. And it just, to me, that caught my attention. So based on that was last year. I thought, well, I'm gonna kind of look into this stuff just to see what's going on. And I kept waiting for these guys to respond. And another thing, they have a PR department at the Mesa Water District. And they spend a lot of money on public relations. Too much money on public relations, in my opinion. They call it community outreach, and there's obviously some good aspects for doing that. But to me, if you live in Costa Mesa, you can only buy water from one place. You can't shop around. You don't need to spend a lot of money on PR. And I'm sure their PR department told them, you don't need to respond to this. Because if you do, it'll create a controversy and it'll keep going. And rightfully so. They didn't respond. I never heard anything. And it's pretty much died down. So I'm bringing it back up. Just to get it started, I'm running for election in Division 4. Division 4 is defined right here within the pink lines. Oh, I need to raise it up. So if you're in Costa Mesa, it's basically the tracks of Mesa Del Mar and College Park, Monticello, and then a couple other little spots. But that's basically it. We divide the city into 5 different divisions. So when I run for election, I'm just running against one guy. That's the division. So some of the things I have here that caught my attention were the rates. That's when I started going into the water board meetings, was when they were getting to the point where they're going to raise rates again. They do this continually, 5-year plans at a time. And it's kind of interesting that when the meeting that they were voting on, there was 2 people there, 2 citizens, myself and another guy, that spoke against it. They had a few letters, but there wasn't that much outrage or any kind of protest. The rates in our city, the information I have farthest it goes back is 2004. The rate for a unit of water was $1.68. As of July 1st, it went up to, it's now at $3.27. So that's basically doubled in 10 years. So I don't know how many of you guys out there have doubled your salary or your wages in 10 years. Most people I know, especially in my industry, have not. You're just lucky to be back even to that. But yet they've doubled it. They sold it to us based on this chart. It's hard to see where you are, but it basically, if you got up close here, you could see it goes flat for the last 20 years. That's the money that they spend on capital expenditures. As you see the line going up, that's their projection for the next 100 years. Now, it's obviously hard to project for 100 years, but you get the drift here when you see this line going up, almost vertical. It's going way up. So they sold this rate increase. And by the way, Tom and I started looking into it, and we thought it was just a 5-year on top of a 5-year. But when I went back and started asking more questions, it's just been continuous. I don't know when it hasn't been raised. And I talked with the president a couple days ago, and he said, no, as far as I know, it's always going up. Something to keep in mind. I did a little research with the city of Newport. I figured that's the closest city to us that's similar. Now they're different in that their water department is run by the city. But I know a lot of guys that work for the water department there. It's completely separate. It's called an enterprise fund where the money stays completely separate. And Newport is different than us in that in Costa Mesa now, we don't have to import any water. We get all our water right here within our town since they finished the project over here, not far from here, over on Geisler. All the water comes from underground. We're very fortunate. We're the only city like that in Orange County, as far as I know. Newport Beach imports 30% of their water. Imported water costs 3 times the amount of water that you pump out of the ground. So you can do the math. The cost of water is generally about 25% of the overall cost. But with having to import 30%, as Newport does, those guys are cheaper than we are. They're $3.08 right now. So things like that, to me, when I start looking at things, it doesn't look right. It doesn't seem right. I also analyzed the different salaries for the upper management. You can see here where I highlighted, this is Mesa Water on top, Newport Beach below. Newport Beach, they call him utilities director. And he does not only water, He does sewer and sanitation, the trash. He does street lights, and he does oil wells. So one guy does those 4 jobs. Our guy at Mesa does 1 job, water. Now, the latest information I could get from Mesa was 2012. At that point, our guy made all in $315,000. Newport Beach, guy that does those 4 jobs that I mentioned, he gets 184. Big difference. And it basically carries through that way all the way down, from the top down, the upper management, I would call it. To me, that's something's wrong. I keep hearing how great our manager is. You know, he's the best one. Why does he have to be the highest paid? I don't know. Who set these rates? Who set these payroll costs? I don't know. They've obviously happened over time. To me, that's a good argument for term limits. All the guys that have been on the board are good guys, like I said, but the system corrupts you. I don't know if people know how people in special districts get paid, but they get paid per meeting. Next week, there'll be a chamber breakfast. So anybody from the water company or the sanitation that wants to go, not only gets their breakfast paid for, but they get what they call a day of service. Water, it's $207. So if we're going to breakfast and being at the chamber for an hour and a half, you get your $207. Tonight they had a board meeting that lasted from 6 to 6:30, another $207. The things that qualify for our meeting, I mean, we had one of the directors speak here at the tea party. He put in for a day of service, $207. They get up to 10 of those per month. And generally they get them all. So these guys are pretty well paid. To me, it's excessive. And mainly when I start telling people this, they're in shock. They think, I thought these guys were volunteers. So when I asked the current board, why do we need to get paid? Why is the city council getting paid less than the water guys? Shouldn't that be the benchmark and everybody comes down from that? Well, we believe that you should be compensated for the outreach, because we want to promote community outreach. Well, in the old days, people that got elected, that was part of their job. You went out to the community. You went places. You didn't necessarily get paid for it. That was just part of the deal. You knew that when you were running. Now it's different. Lastly, I'll save time for some questions. Costa Mesa now has a $30 million reserve. So from raising the rates, getting them up there, they justify it by saying, well, we needed it for bonding, AAA bond. Newport has a $10 million reserve. According to their general manager, they're fine with that. They fund their capital projects as they need to, right out of their cash flow. So the $10 million reserve is plenty. In Costa Mesa, we have 23,400 customers. In Newport, it's 27,000. So we're comparable, but they have a few more. So not only do we have a $30 million reserve, we're going to increase it with this new raise to $40 million. And that's, to me, when a local agency has so much money, money has a way of, like water, finding its own level. It has a way of escaping. You know, these guys, they've reduced the number of employees from 70 to 45, but they've ramped up the number of consultants that they've been hiring. 2 months ago, they hired a company to make them more efficient, a 2-year contract, $550,000. Now, at the end of it, they're going to get an award, I'm sure. Every meeting, pretty much, they get an award for something. They're going to get an award after this for being one of the most efficient water districts in the county. 2 meetings ago, I asked them, they gave themselves a transparency award. And I said, well, how come other districts, even the sanitation district, Arlene's on the sanitation, they post their information within a month or so. Why are we 2 years behind? Well, by law, we can wait 2 years. Yeah, but you just gave yourself a transparency award. Why? Don't the residents deserve that? Last thing I'm going to say is there's been talk, the drums are beating out there about a consolidation. Merging the sanitation board with the water board. I am not an advocate of that. I don't know if that makes sense. But I do know the citizens of our community deserve to have that on the table, deserve that discussion. We need to come up with ways to run more efficiently, because what happens if you don't, this is what happens. That's my opinion. So thanks for having me. I'll take questions.
Jeff?
Jeff.
Show the mic to him. Yeah.
If there's a 30 million reserve, infrastructure projects are a lot. I mean, what is the long-term look? It's hundreds of millions, probably.
Their 100-year plan was basically $1 billion, but it was plus or minus 500 million either way. They couldn't, I mean, you can't project 100 million. Right now, Jim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a 5-year plan for 35 million. Right now, they're netting, or they're adding to the reserve over $6 million every year. So they could basically fund that with their cash flow that they have going right now. And all you have to do is look here. It's hard to see from back there. But this is reality. This is the last 20 years. Nothing. Rates have been going like this. Basically flat on the bottom there. There's no capital expenditures. You don't start tearing up pipes if they're not leaking. The meeting that I was at, where they voted for the increase, they had a report that said they were leak-free. So why do you need more money if you're leak-free? Wait till you need it. Go back to the citizens. Basically, with a reserve that big, you do the math, they're going to end up with $2,000 from each ratepayer in the city. That's your money that they have control over. Why not cut that in half, split the difference? Give everybody back $1,000. You keep 1,000 if you need it, or come up with a plan like that. All I'm trying to do, what I hope to do, even if you're not in my division and you live in Costa Mesa, I want to change the rate increase from this to this. Just make it go down. I'd love to eliminate it. I don't see that happening with the current board. I'm only one person. If I did get elected, it's tough running against an incumbent. It's not going to be a walk in the park. But my job is to get out there and tell people exactly what I'm telling you guys right now. And I think I got a good shot when I start telling people what the facts are.